The Hockey Star's Secret Family, a novel by Joan Savage. Chapter 1. Coming Home. The last time Ryan Carter left Millhaven, he was 22 years old, carrying nothing but a duffel bag and the biggest dream of his life. He didn't look back. Now, 12 years later, he was coming home in the back of a black SUV with a torn rotator cuff, a bruised ego, and a physical therapist who kept texting him motivational quotes he didn't ask for. The highway sign read, Millhaven, population 4,200, welcome home. Ryan snorted at that last part. Millhaven didn't feel like home. It felt like a place he'd outgrown. Or maybe, and he was only willing to admit this at 2 a.m. when the painkillers were wearing off, it felt like a place he'd run from. "We're about 10 minutes out, Mr. Carter," said his driver Marcus, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Ryan," he said for the 14th time this week. "Call me Ryan." Marcus smiled patiently and said nothing. Ryan turned back to the window. The city had dissolved behind them hours ago, replaced by rolling green hills and the dark shimmer of Lake Millhaven in the distance. Summer was just getting started here. He could tell by the way the wildflowers were crowding the roadside, and the late evening light was stretching long and golden across the fields. It was beautiful, he supposed, in the way that things you've forgotten are always more beautiful than you remembered. His phone buzzed. His agent, Derek. "Tell me you're not actually doing this," Derek said by way of hello. "I'm doing this. Ryan, you can rehab in Vancouver. You can rehab in Miami. You can rehab on a yacht in the Mediterranean. I will make it happen. I grew up here, Derek. The quiet will help me focus. The quiet will drive you insane in 72 hours. A pause. The Coyotes deal is still on the table. Coach Hendricks wants an answer by September. Ryan closed his eyes. $68 million over 4 years. Ryan closed his eyes. The biggest contract of his career. The kind of money that meant security, legacy, a statue outside an arena someday. Everything he'd worked his whole life for. "I'll call you in 2 weeks, Ryan said. 2 weeks. Derek repeated, like the words physically hurt him. Ryan hung up. The SUV turned off the main road and followed the familiar curve down into Millhaven proper, past the old hardware store and the gas station and the diner where Ryan had eaten approximately 300 plates of blueberry pancakes as a teenager. The town had changed, but not much. A few new storefronts, a fresh coat of paint on the church. The same white clock tower in the center of Main Street, still reading 4 minutes slow. Had rented his childhood home. His mother had retired to Florida 2 years ago and had been delighted when he called. "I always said that house was waiting for you," she'd told him. He hadn't known what to say to that. Waiting for you. Marcus pulled up to the yellow clapboard house at the end of Birch Street. It looked smaller than Ryan remembered. Or maybe he'd just gotten bigger. Not physically, but in all the ways that mattered. The weight of a 12-year career, the pressure of being Ryan Carter, team captain, the face on billboards, the name on the back of 100,000 jerseys. He got out slowly, favoring his left side, and stood on the front walk. A neighbor's sprinkler ticked in the background. Somewhere down the block, a kid was laughing. Just for a second, standing in the gold-washed evening light of Millhaven, Ryan Carter felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like a person, not a brand, not a contract, not a headline, just a person. He grabbed his bag from Marcus and walked up the front steps. The key was under the 3rd flower pot, exactly where his mother had always kept it. Some things, at least, didn't change. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The house smelled like old wood and lemon polish and something faintly floral. His mother's doing, no doubt, airing the place out before his arrival. The furniture was covered in white sheets. The light was fading. Somewhere deep in the house, a clock was ticking. Ryan set his bag down in the hallway and looked around at the quiet, dust-sheeted rooms. He had no idea what he was doing here. But he was here. And maybe, for now, that was enough. He'd deal with everything else tomorrow. He'd deal with the contract, the rehab, the career questions. He'd deal with the part of him that knew, somewhere quiet and buried deep, that coming back to Millhaven was never really about the shoulder. Chapter 2. The Little Girl with His Eyes. Emma Collins had been up since 4:30. This was not unusual. The croissants needed 2 hours of cold proofing before the oven, and the sourdough starter had moods that Emma had learned to accommodate like a very temperamental roommate. By the time the sun was properly up, she had flour on her left cheekbone, a coffee going cold beside the industrial mixer, and her daughter Sophie sitting on the tall stool at the prep counter, dressed in her hockey jersey and eating a stolen snickerdoodle. "You are not supposed to eat those before breakfast," Emma said without turning around. "I am eating breakfast," Sophie said reasonably. "The snickerdoodle is breakfast." "Cookies are not breakfast. Pancakes are basically cookies." Emma turned to look at her daughter. 6 years old, gap-toothed, wearing a Chicago Wolves jersey 3 sizes too big, her dark hair in 2 uneven pigtails that she'd done herself. Sophie Collins was the most infuriating and wonderful person Emma had ever known. She argued like a lawyer, laughed like a honking goose, and had opinions about everything from cloud formations to the structural integrity of sugar cookies. "Eat a banana," Emma said. "Cookies. I'll eat a banana if you let me come to the farmer's market with you." "You come to the farmer's market every Saturday." "Then my condition is met." Sophie took a triumphant bite of the snickerdoodle. Emma shook her head, but she was smiling. The bakery, Collins's, had been open for 4 years, tucked into the corner of Main Street between the florist and the bookshop. It was small and warm, and exactly the kind of place that smelled like cinnamon and softened hard mornings. Emma had built it herself, or close enough. She'd taken out a loan, learned every recipe 3 times over, painted the walls the color of warm honey, and hung mismatched vintage plates along the back wall until the space felt like something she could believe in. It was hers. That mattered more than she could say. Sophie hopped off the stool and went to peer through the front window at the empty street. "Mom, there's a really fancy car outside the Hendersons." Emma was counting the morning pastries. "Like, really fancy. The kind that has a driver." "It's 6 in the morning, baby. Come away from the window." By 9 o'clock, the bakery was open and the Saturday crowd had begun filtering in. Emily Hargrove wanted her usual apple turnover. The Kowalski brothers argued over who got the last bear claw. Old Mr. Finch sat in the corner with his newspaper and a cup of dark roast and smiled at everything like a man who had stopped needing very much from the world. Emma was pulling a fresh tray of cinnamon rolls from the oven when the bell above the door chimed, and Sophie, who was doing homework at the corner table, said loudly, "Whoa!" Emma looked up. The man who'd walked in was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw that looked like it had been designed specifically to win arguments. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt and jeans, and he moved with the careful, deliberate gait of someone in mild pain. He was also, and Emma's stomach dropped to somewhere around her knees, extraordinarily familiar. He scanned the bakery the way athletes always did, Emma had noticed, checking exits and sightlines out of habit. Then his eyes landed on the chalkboard menu and he stepped up to the counter. He hadn't seen her yet. Emma had approximately 4 seconds to decide how to handle this. She used them to set down the cinnamon roll tray, push her hair behind one ear, and arrange her face into the expression of a completely normal person who had not spent the last 7 years building a life around the absence of this exact man. "Good morning," she said. "What can I get you?" Ryan Carter looked up from the menu board, and the color drained from his face. "Emma." His voice was rough, like the word had been sitting in dry storage for years. "Hi, Ryan." She was proud of how steady she sounded. "Coffee?" He stared at her for a moment that lasted approximately 1 geological era. Yeah, Yeah, coffee, please." He cleared his throat. "I didn't know you. I didn't realize you were... I own the place." She was already reaching for a mug. "Milk? Sugar? Black is fine." He was still staring. "You own this place." 4 years. She slid the mug across the counter. "It's beautiful." He said it like he meant it, then softer. You look exactly the same, Emma." She looked at him steadily. "I really don't." Before he could answer, Sophie materialized at Emma's elbow with all the subtlety of a golden retriever and zero of the social inhibitions. "Is that Ryan Carter?" Sophie asked, staring up at him with enormous eyes. Ryan blinked, looked down, and the entire universe seemed to pause. Sophie Collins was looking up at him with dark hair and a gap-toothed smile and eyes that were exactly the same shade of gray-green as his own. "That's me," Ryan said, his voice coming out strange and quiet. Do you know who I am?" Strange and quiet. "You play for the Chicago Wolves," Sophie said with the confidence of someone stating a natural law. "You're the team captain. Your points per game average this season was 1.3 before you got hurt. And your jersey number is 11, which is my favorite number because it's 2 ones standing together, which is the same as 1 + 1 = 2, which is the smallest addition problem." Ryan stared at her. Emma watched something move across his face. Recognition, confusion, a slow dawning shock. And she felt her whole carefully constructed world begin to hold its breath. That's a lot of facts," Ryan said carefully. "I know all the facts," Sophie agreed. "I'm Sophie." She stuck out her hand. "Sophie Collins." Ryan shook her hand. His jaw was tight. When he looked up at Emma, his eyes were asking a question she wasn't ready to answer. "I should get back to the kitchen," Emma said. "Sophie, back to your homework." "But Mom?" "Homework." "Sophie." Ryan's voice was very quiet. "Emma." She met his eyes across the counter. There was a whole conversation in that look. 7 years of it, compressed into a single held breath. "I get off at 2, she said. Just that. He nodded once. He would be back. She already knew. Chapter 3. A Life-Changing Secret. He came back at 2:15. Emma had sent Sophie to her friend Lily's house. She'd called ahead, citing a vague errand. And Sophie had gone without complaint, mostly because Lily had a trampoline and a dog named Pretzel. The bakery was closed. Emma was wiping down the last of the tables when the bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to find Ryan filling the doorway with his broad shoulders and his careful, guarded expression. "Door was unlocked," he said. "I know." She finished wiping the table. "Sit down." He sat. She stayed standing. Not intentionally. It just felt safer that way, like she needed the floor under her feet. "Just tell me," he said quietly. Under her feet. "Is she mine?" Emma had practiced this moment in her head more times than she could count. She'd imagined it calm, logical, matter-of-fact. She would explain her reasoning. She would be composed. "Yes," she said. Her voice barely shook. "Shay's yours." Ryan closed his eyes. A long moment passed. When he opened them, there was something raw and unguarded in his expression. Not anger, Not yet. Just the kind of shock that comes from the ground shifting without warning. "Shay's 6, he said. 6.5. Her birthday's in December." December. He did the math visibly. 7 years ago? Yes. Another long silence. Outside, a pair of sparrows argued in the eaves. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was level, but the quiet in it was the kind that preceded weather. Emma pulled out the chair across from him and sat. She'd promised herself she wouldn't get defensive. She'd promised herself she would stay calm and explain and be fair. "You'd just signed with Chicago," she said. "It was the biggest day of your life. You called me from the signing, Ryan. You were so happy. I'd never heard you that happy." She folded her hands on the table. "You told me you were finally doing it, finally getting out. You used those words. Getting out. You said Millhaven felt like a cage." Ryan flinched. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later, and I thought about calling you. I thought about it every day for months. But you were in Chicago. You had everything you'd ever wanted. You had your dream." She met his eyes. "I didn't want to be the phone call that took that away from you." "That wasn't your decision to make," he said. The weather had arrived. "I know that now." Her voice held. "I know. I had a daughter." His voice cracked just slightly at the end. "For 6 years, I had a daughter, and I didn't know." "I'm sorry." She meant it completely. "I am so sorry, Ryan. I thought I was protecting both of you. I was 23 and scared, and I was wrong. I know I was wrong." He stood up and walked to the window. His back was to her, his hands braced on the windowsill, and she watched the tension in his shoulders and thought about how she'd known this moment would come someday. She'd known it, and she still hadn't been ready for it. "Her name is Sophie," he said finally. "Sophie Grace Collins." "Grace." He turned. "That was my grandmother's name." Emma blinked. "I know. I always loved it." Something in his face shifted, a softening around the eyes, small and reluctant. "Does she know?" he asked. "Does she know about me?" "She knows her father lives far away and works very hard," Emma said carefully. "She knows he doesn't know she exists." She paused. "She knows it's not his fault." Ryan looked at her for a long moment. "You told her that?" "I told her that." He sat back down. His hands were on the table between them, and she could see they weren't entirely steady. His hands were on the table. Ryan Carter, who had held the puck steady under the most brutal pressure in professional hockey, who had led his team through 3 overtime periods in the playoffs without a single crack in his composure, was not entirely steady. "I want to meet her," he said. "Properly. I want her to know who I am." "I want that too," Emma exhaled. "But Ryan, she doesn't know you're her father yet. We need to do this carefully. We need to do this right for her." "I'm not going anywhere," he said immediately. And then, like he was surprised by his own certainty, "I'm not going anywhere." Emma looked at him across the table. This man she'd loved at 23, this man she'd let herself grieve for quietly, in the dark, in the years since. He was different now. There was a gravity to him that hadn't been there before, a weight carried in the set of his shoulders. But his eyes were the same. The same eyes she saw every morning on her daughter's face. "Okay," she said softly, her daughter's face. "Then we figure it out." He nodded. And then, very quietly, "She really knows my points per game average?" Emma laughed. Just a small, helpless laugh, born of years of accumulated tension finally finding a hairline crack to escape through. "She really does." Something crossed his face then. Tentative and wondering, and very new. The beginning of pride. Chapter 4. Learning to be a father. The plan, such as it was, Ryan would start by coming to the bakery as a regular customer. He and Emma would find a moment together with Sophie, something low pressure and organic. They would let Sophie set the pace. Nobody would drop any bombshells. It was a careful plan, a sensible plan. It lasted approximately 36 hours before Sophie blew it to pieces. "You came back," Sophie said, appearing beside Ryan's table on his second visit, as if she'd been dispatched there by Central Command. She was carrying a juice box and wearing knee-high rubber boots with frogs on them. "I knew you'd come back." "Did you?" Ryan looked up from his coffee with an expression Emma could only describe as a very large man trying extremely hard not to seem overwhelmed. "People always come back to Mom's bakery," Sophie explained, sliding into the chair across from him without being invited. "It's because of the cinnamon rolls. They have a scientifically proven chemical that makes your brain want to return. Mom didn't put it in on purpose. She just figured out the right butter-to-cinnamon ratio." "Sophie," Emma said from behind the counter. "I'm being informative," Sophie said. "You're sitting at the manners table without asking." "He doesn't mind." Sophie looked at Ryan. "You don't mind, right?" "I really don't," Ryan said. He sounded almost relieved, Emma noticed. Like having something concrete to do, someone to talk to, was easier than just sitting with his coffee and the enormity of what he now knew. Sophie proceeded to occupy the next 20 minutes with a comprehensive review of the Wolves' last season, her personal theory about why the third-period power play kept failing, and a detailed account of her own hockey career, which consisted of one season of recreational under-7 league and one regional tournament where her team had come in fourth. "We lost because Tyler Berg kept falling down," Sophie said. "Not because Hayes' bad at skating, Hayes actually okay, but because he gets excited and forgets to bend his knees. I told him, he didn't listen." "Bending your knees is everything," Ryan said seriously. Sophie pointed at him. "Exactly. That's what I said." From behind the pastry case, Emma watched them. She was holding a bowl of cream cheese frosting that she'd stopped stirring several minutes ago. Ryan was leaning forward slightly, his forearms on the table, looking at Sophie the way she imagined astronomers looked at newly discovered planets, with this stunned, disbelieving wonder, like they couldn't quite trust that the thing in front of them was real. It made her chest ache. By Thursday, Ryan was stopping in every morning. By the following Tuesday, Sophie had made him a hand-drawn chart of what she considered the 5 most important hockey plays in history, which she presented to him with the gravity of a congressional briefing. "Play 3 is the most important," she informed him. Ryan studied the chart. The drawings were enthusiastic if impressionistic. "Is play 3 the one where a little square is chasing a circle?" "That's the puck and a defender," Sophie said patiently. "Of course it is." Emma caught Ryan's eye over Sophie's head. He was trying not to smile. She pressed her lips together. It was the first moment since he'd walked back into her life that felt not easy. Nothing was easy. But almost normal. Like a glimpse of something that might someday become ordinary. The harder moments happened away from Sophie. They were sharing stolen minutes after Sophie was in bed. Phone calls, a few front porch conversations, working through the logistics and the history and the minefield of feelings neither of them had names for yet. Ryan was still angry. Emma could feel it, controlled and contained beneath the surface, surfacing sometimes in the careful flatness of his voice. "I missed her first steps," he said one evening, sitting on Emma's front porch. The fireflies were out over the lawn. "First words, first day of school." "You didn't miss them because you chose to?" Emma said. "You missed them because I made a decision without you. I own that. I'll spend the rest of my life owning it. I know. He was quiet for a moment. I know that. I know. I need you to let me be angry sometimes. I'm not angry at you every minute, but sometimes it hits me, and I need it to be okay. It's okay, Emma said. Be angry. You've earned it. He glanced over at her. How are you so calm about this? I'm not calm, she said. I've been terrified since the second you walked into my bakery. I've been waiting for you to be furious, or to disappear, or to decide this is too complicated. She looked out at the fireflies. But you keep coming back, and Sophie is starting to look at you like you hung the moon, and that is the most wonderful and most terrifying thing I've ever watched. Ryan was very still beside her. I'm not going to disappear, he said quietly. I know, she said, and for the first time, she meant it. 2 days later, on a bright Saturday morning, Emma sat Sophie down at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of hot chocolate, the good kind, with mini marshmallows, and told her daughter the truth. The good kind. Sophie listened. She was very still, which was unusual. She held her mug with both hands and watched Emma's face. When Emma finished, Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Ryan Carter, Sophie said carefully, is my dad. Yes. Another long pause. Does he know? He knows. He found out last week. He wants to be your dad, Sophie. He wants that very much. Sophie looked down at her hot chocolate. Emma's heart was doing things hearts shouldn't have to do. Is that why he keeps coming to the bakery? Sophie asked. Partly, and because he likes the cinnamon rolls. Sophie almost smiled. The butter to cinnamon ratio. The butter to cinnamon ratio, Emma agreed. Sophie was quiet for another moment. Then, can I tell Lily? Emma blinked. Maybe not quite yet, okay? Let us get to know him first. But eventually? Eventually. Sophie considered this with the gravity of a 6-year-old diplomat navigating complex negotiations. Okay, she said finally. Can I have another marshmallow? Okay. Emma laughed, startled and relieved. She put a handful of marshmallows in Sophie's mug. Mom? Yeah, baby? I'm glad you told me. Sophie looked up at her with those gray-green eyes, Ryan's eyes. And I think it's okay, if he's nice. He's nice, Emma said softly. He does know that bending your knees is important, Sophie said. That's a good sign. Chapter 5. The Summer They Never Had. The summer opened up around them like a gift none of them had been expecting. It happened slowly, then all at once. The way summers do in small towns, where the days seem long and leisurely, and then suddenly you look back and realize that 3 weeks have passed and something important has shifted. Ryan's physical therapist, a rigorous woman named Barb, who drove up from the city twice a week, had given him a strict protocol. Daily range of motion exercises, cold therapy, resistance work, and something she called restorative stillness, which Ryan privately interpreted as an instruction to sit on the porch and brood. He was very good at the brood. He was getting better at the stillness. What Barb hadn't prescribed, and what was proving more healing than anything else, was an almost 7-year-old girl who had decided, with the absolute certainty available only to small children and Supreme Court justices, that Ryan Carter's convalescence needed her direct supervision. You should ice it for longer, Sophie informed him on a Tuesday morning, watching him apply his ice pack at the Collinses' kitchen table. Emma had agreed to let Sophie spend an hour here after day camp while she prepped for the next morning. My teammate Olivia dislocated her shoulder at practice and her doctor said 20 minutes minimum. I'm doing 20 minutes, Ryan said. You've been doing 11. I've been doing, he checked his watch. 11 minutes. How do you know that? I counted. Sophie pulled out her homework folder. I'm going to do my reading worksheet over here while you finish. Don't take the ice off. Yes, ma'am, Ryan said. From the doorway, Emma watched this exchange and thought, there it is. The thing she hadn't known she was watching for. Ryan's face had gone soft in a way she hadn't seen before. The particular softness of being seen by someone small who expected nothing from you except that you be present. He kept the ice on for 22 minutes. They settled into a rhythm. Mornings at the bakery, afternoons expanding into impromptu adventures. Mornings at the bakery. Ryan, who hadn't known the first thing about entertaining a 6-year-old, turned out to have a gift for it. Not because he was performing or trying, but because he was genuinely curious about her, the way you're curious about someone you're still learning. He took her to the lake. They skipped stones for an hour while Emma sat on the dock with a book she pretended to read. Sophie informed him that the correct wrist technique was critical and that Ryan's grip was wrong. My grip is fine. Your grip is why it sank. It sank because of wind resistance. Wind resistance, Sophie repeated, like she was filing this away in a folder labeled Excuses Adults Make. He adjusted his grip. The stone skipped 6 times. Better? Sophie conceded. They went to the Saturday farmers market. Ryan in a baseball cap and sunglasses that were spectacularly ineffective at disguising him to anyone who was looking. Half the town recognized him. Millhaven had always followed his career with the proprietary pride of a small town that produced exactly one celebrity. And he signed autographs with a patience Emma found surprising. But when a man from the local paper wanted a photo, and Sophie reached up and took Ryan's hand to stay close in the crowd, the photograph he actually ended up in wasn't for the paper. It was the one on Emma's phone. Sophia's small hand in his large one, both of them looking at the honey stand. Emma looked at that photograph later, alone in the bakery kitchen at 5 a.m, and something moved through her that she wasn't ready to name. There were afternoons on the back porch. Sophie doing homework, Emma doing accounts, Ryan doing his prescribed exercises and pretending not to wince. With the lake glittering at the end of the yard and the particular late summer light lying gold across everything. They talked, the 3 of them, about things that mattered and things that didn't. Ryan learned that Sophia's favorite color was the specific blue of ice right before a hockey game, that she was working on a novel about a dragon who wanted to be a librarian, and that she was gravely disappointed in the third period performance of no fewer than 6 NHL teams. Sophie learned that Ryan had grown up 3 streets over, that he'd broken his collarbone at age 9 by attempting a jump he absolutely should not have attempted, and that his favorite food was blueberry pie, which happened to be Emma's specialty. I'll make you a pie, Sophie announced. I would love that, Ryan said seriously. I'm going to supervise, Sophie clarified. Mom does the actual baking part. I do the quality control. What does quality control involve? Mostly tasting. She paused. A lot of tasting. Mostly tasting. Ryan looked at Emma over Sophia's head, and his expression was unguarded in a way that made her breath catch. Full and wondering and a little overwhelmed and new. Shay's extraordinary, he said quietly one evening on the front porch after Sophie was asleep. I know, Emma said. You did that. He glanced at her. You made her exactly who she is. Emma shook her head. She came like that. I mostly just kept out of her way. He laughed, really laughed, the first fully unguarded laugh she'd heard from him. It changed his whole face. It made him look like the boy she'd known at 22, back when he was all possibility and reaching forward towards something bright. Emma looked away. She was not going to fall in love with this man again. She was absolutely not going to do that again. Chapter 6. Falling in Love Again. The Mill Haven Summer Festival happened every year on the first weekend of August, taking over the town square with food stalls and craft booths and a stage for the local bluegrass band that had been playing the same set list for 11 years. There was a pie contest that Collins's Bakery had won 3 years running, a fishing derby at the lake, and a children's parade where the Under-12 Hockey League marched in their jerseys and pretended this was not an extremely low-speed exercise. Sophie had been talking about the festival for approximately a month. More specifically, she had been talking about how she was going to enter the pie contest alongside Emma. As a co-baker, mom, with official credit, and how she intended to win, and how the dragon in her novel was going to attend a library festival in Chapter 7 as direct inspiration. Ryan came to the festival as direct inspiration. This had not been the original plan, or it had been the plan but stated casually, and then somehow it became the three of them walking into the festival together in the gold light of early August, Sophie between them holding both their hands without asking, swinging slightly as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Emma and Ryan looked at each other over her head. "Well?" Emma said quietly. "Yeah," Ryan agreed. They did not let go of Sophia's hands. The festival moved around them in that particular golden afternoon way. The smell of kettle corn and fried dough, the bluegrass band launching into something cheerful and slightly out of tune, the kids' parade assembling in a chaotic knot near the bandstand. Sophia's team, the Millhaven Mighty Ducks, named by Sophie, approved by Democratic vote, assembled in their jerseys, and Sophie let go of both their hands to go take her place in the lineup. "Shay's in the parade," Ryan said. "Place in the lineup." He was watching her with the slightly dazed expression he wore often now. "Every year. She looks so serious." "Parading is serious business." Emma tilted her head. "Come on, there's a good spot near the fountain." They claimed their spot, and when the parade passed and Sophie saw them together on the sideline, her face broke into the enormous gap-toothed grin that Emma knew contained Ryan's whole smile, slightly rearranged, and Sophie waved with both arms like she was signaling an aircraft. Ryan waved back. His jaw was tight in the way it got when he was trying not to show how moved he was. Emma pressed her lips together and watched the parade. He was. Later, when the pie contest results were announced, Collins's Bakery, for the 4th consecutive year, on the strength of a blueberry lavender pie that Sophie had officially co-designed. Sophie pumped her fist exactly the way Ryan had in the clip from the Stanley Cup semifinals that she had watched 17 times on Emma's laptop. "She does my celebration," Ryan said very quietly. "She does everyone's celebration," Emma said, but she was watching his face. "She's always done yours, though. I noticed that first." He turned to look at her. The festival light was warm, and the band was playing something slow now, something drifting and sweet, and they were standing closer than they needed to be. "Emma. Don't." She said it gently. "I haven't said anything yet. I know what you're going to say." "Do you?" She looked up at him. "You're going to tell me you still think about us, about what we were. And Ryan, I believe you. I do. About what we were. But thinking about what we were doesn't tell me what would be now. And Sophie is..." She stopped, found the right words. "Sophie is everything. She can't be a casualty of something we tried and couldn't finish." He was quiet for a moment. "What if we could finish it?" Emma met his eyes. They were very close. The band played. "Then take your time," she said softly. "Make sure." He nodded, slowly. Sophie reappeared between them with a ribbon and a face full of kettle corn. "4th year in a row," she announced. "We are unstoppable." "We are," Emma agreed. dropping a kiss on the top of her head. Ryan looked at the two of them, the woman and the child, both dark-haired and bright-eyed and covered in light. And something settled in him, deep and certain, the way a foundation settles. He was already sure. He was just working up to being brave enough to prove it. Already sure. Chapter 7. The Dream Contract. Derek called on a Wednesday morning in late August with the news that the Coyotes had moved their deadline. "End of September," Derek said. "Ryan, that is 1 month. 1 month, and then this deal goes away, and it does not come back." Ryan was standing in the kitchen of his mother's house with a mug of coffee, looking out at the backyard where the maple tree was just starting to turn at the edges. The first hint of fall coming. He'd been in Millhaven for 8 weeks. "How's the shoulder?" Derek asked. "Better. Barb says another 6 weeks of rehab before full clearance." 6 weeks. The Coyotes have a spot in their training camp they're holding for you. Ryan, this is $68 million and a chance to win. They're building around you. You'd be the centerpiece. "I know," Ryan said. "You're going to do it, right? Tell me you're going to do it." "I'll call you this weekend," Ryan said. "This weekend," Derek repeated, audibly pained. Ryan set the phone down and stood in the kitchen for a long while. The contract was everything he'd worked for. Had been playing professional hockey for 12 years. Had given everything to the game. His knees, his shoulder, his 20s, the kind of sustained singular focus that leaves a long list of things unlived. This deal wasn't just money, it was a statement. You matter. You still have what it takes. The story ends well. Arizona was 1,200 miles from Millhaven. He thought about Sophie's hand in his at the farmer's market. The way she'd corrected his ice pack timing with the seriousness of a small physician. The way she'd said, last Tuesday, out of nowhere, "Dad." Not asking, just trying it out. Like she was getting used to the sound of it. Had to pretend to need something from the refrigerator so she wouldn't see his face. He thought about Emma, about every front porch conversation. He thought about the way she laughed when something genuinely surprised her. Not her polite laugh, the real one, the surprised one that she tried to contain and never could. About standing beside her at the summer festival in the golden light, knowing, with the certainty of something long overdue, that there was nowhere else he wanted to be. He thought about the version of himself that had left Millhaven at 22. Getting out, he'd called it. He thought about Emma hearing that and making the decision she'd made. He still ached about it. But he understood it, in a way he hadn't been able to at first. She'd heard him talk about his dream, and she'd stepped aside. Because she loved him. Because she loved him in the way that sometimes means making the choice that breaks you. What did he love the way she'd loved him then? He picked up the phone and called Emma. "The Coyotes deal," he said when she answered. "I need to tell you about it." There was a pause. "Okay," she said. There was a pause. $68 million, 4 years, Arizona. He gave her the whole picture. He owed her that, the whole picture. No softening, no framing. She deserved to decide what to do with the truth. She was quiet for a moment. "Ryan," she said carefully, "you should know that whatever you decide, this doesn't change anything. Sophie has a father now. That's not conditional. I'm not going to take that away because you go play hockey." "I know that," he said. "I do." "But you're calling me to tell me about it," she said. "So, what are you trying to figure out?" He looked out the kitchen window at the maple tree. "I'm trying to figure out what I want," he said. "Not what I'm supposed to want, what I actually want." Emma was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was gentle and careful, in the way it was when she was being honest about something that cost her. "I can't answer that for you," she said. "And I won't. I can't answer that for you because the last time I made a decision based on what I thought you wanted, we both missed 7 years." "I know." He exhaled. "I know. But I will tell you one thing," she said. "What?" "The version of you that walked into my bakery 8 weeks ago? That man wasn't running toward Arizona. He was running away from something else. A beat. I think you should figure out what that something else was before you make any decisions." He held the phone for a long moment after she hung up. Outside, the first maple leaf let go of its branch. It drifted down slowly in the still morning air. He watched it fall. Chapter 8. The Fight That Changes Everything. The fight, when it came, was not about the contract. It was about a Tuesday afternoon when Sophie had a school presentation, and Ryan had promised he would be there. Had promised Sophie directly, who had extracted this promise with the thoroughness of a trial attorney, and then told him what slide number she was going to be on. And Ryan's physical therapist had moved the appointment, and then moved it again. And then a sports journalist from a national outlet had shown up at the house, because someone had leaked that Ryan was in Millhaven, and by the time Ryan got to the school, it was 3:45, and the presentations had finished at 3:30. Sophie's face when she saw him arrive, late, was something Ryan would not forget for a very long time. She didn't cry. She was very matter-of-fact about it. She told him it was okay, that her presentation had gone well, that she had told the class about the Dragon Librarian novel, and her teacher had said it sounded very imaginative. About the Dragon Librarian. She was polite and collected and 6 years old, and Ryan felt like the worst person alive. Emma didn't say anything in front of Sophie. She drove home with Sophie in the back seat, listening to her describe the presentation in detail, asking the right follow-up questions in the right places. It was only after Sophie was bathed and in bed, and Ryan was in the kitchen, cleaning up the dinner dishes, an offering, futile and necessary, that Emma came in and closed the door. "She practiced that presentation for 2 weeks, Emma said. Her voice was quiet and very level. "She went over it every night before bed. She told me you were going to be there. She told me," a small pause, "and I'm quoting here, that you were reliable, which is not a word a 6-year-old uses on her own. She got it from you." Ryan set down the dish. "I know. Emma, I'm not finished." She held up one hand. "I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not finished. I'm not going to make this into something bigger than it is, because I know it was a scheduling nightmare, and I know you tried. But Ryan," her eyes were steady on his, "she has been let down by exactly one person in her whole life, and that's her absent father. And now you're here, and you're becoming the thing she has faith in, and I need you to understand what that means. Faith is the most breakable thing she has." He felt it land, all of it. "I know," he said. "You're right. I know. If you take the Arizona contract—" She stopped, gathered herself. "If you take the Arizona contract, that is your right, and I support it, and we will make it work. We will figure out holidays and summers and video calls, and she will be okay. Shay's resilient. Shay's built of something tough." Her voice steadied. "But you cannot be here and be gone at the same time, Ryan. You can't be half in, not with her." "I'm not half in," he said. "You told a journalist where you were. I'm not half in. I didn't. Someone from your world did. And your world followed." She looked at him. "That's not a criticism. That's just, your life is very big, Ryan. And we are a very small town. And I need to know that if you're going to be in Sophia's life, You're going to be here, not somewhere in between. He looked at her for a long moment. What about you? He said quietly. Is that all this is? Sophie? Emma blinked. Don't. She turned away. Emma, what about us? Because I'm standing here and I feel like I've been walking back toward you for 12 years without knowing that's what I was doing. And I know the timing is terrible, and the history is complicated, and I know I don't deserve anything from you. But I need to ask, because if I'm going to figure out what I want, if I'm going to figure out what really matters, then I need to know if you feel anything. Because if you don't, I will accept that, and I will... Stop. She turned back. Her eyes were bright. Stop. Tell me, he said. Just tell me. She looked at him across the kitchen. The whole long, complicated story between them was in that look. The love and the loss and the years and the girl asleep down the hall with his eyes and her mother's stubborn heart. I never stopped, she said. It came out barely above a whisper. I never stopped, Ryan. That's the honest truth. And I've been terrified of it since the second you walked in the door. He crossed the kitchen in 4 steps. She met him halfway. It was not a dramatic kiss. It was the kind that comes from having waited too long, careful and a little trembling and full of everything that had been unsaid. It was the kind that meant, I found you. I'm not running. When they pulled back, Emma laughed quietly, pressing her forehead against his shoulder. You are so much trouble, she said. I know, he said into her hair. I'm working on it. I know. They stood in the kitchen for a while, not speaking, while the house was quiet around them, and down the hall, Sophie Collins slept in her hockey jersey, with her Dragon Librarian notebook on the pillow beside her. Ryan, Emma said softly. Yeah. Don't miss anything else. Her voice was careful. I'm asking you, don't miss anything else. I want, he said. I promise. He meant it with everything he had. Now he had to figure out how to be the man who kept it. Chapter 9. What Really Matters. He called Derek on a Friday morning in early September, when the air had turned cool and the lake was slate-colored, and the maples had gone fully gold. I'm not taking the Arizona contract, Ryan said. There was a long silence. You're not taking it, Derek repeated. No. Ryan, $68 million. I know what it is. Have you lost your mind? Did something happen to your head? Do you have a concussion? I want you to describe to me the number of fingers you're holding up right now. Derek. 4 of them? 5? I have a daughter, Ryan said. Silence. What? A daughter, 6 years old. She lives here in Millhaven. I didn't know about her until I came back. He paused. Her name is Sophie. She knows my points per game average, and she is the funniest person I've ever met. And she called me Dad last week, and I will not be 1,200 miles away from her for 4 years. The silence stretched out. You have a daughter, Derek said at last, in a completely different voice. I have a daughter. And her mother is the woman I should have stayed for the first time, Ryan said simply. Another long pause. Okay, Derek said. His voice had gone quiet. Okay, then what do you want to do? About hockey, about your career, because you still have a shoulder and a game and you are 34, not 44. I want to play, Ryan said. I do. I want to finish on my terms. He looked out at the lake. Find me something closer. Something that doesn't take me away from this. A shorter contract. 1 year, maybe 2, with a team that's local or close enough to matter. I know it won't be the money Arizona is offering. I don't care about the money. You don't care about the money, Derek said faintly. I care about being home. He could hear Derek processing this in real time. The very particular sound of a man revising his entire picture of a client. Let me make some calls, Derek said finally. Ryan hung up and sat on the porch for a long time, looking at the lake. He called his mother next. She cried when he told her about Sophie. She cried for a long time, happy crying and sad crying intermixed in the way of mothers who are doing grief and joy at the same time. I want to meet her, his mother said. You will, Ryan said. I promise. And Emma? Oh, Ryan, Emma Collins. I know, Mom. I always liked her, Emma Collins. I always thought. I know you did. He was smiling. Don't mess it up this time. That's my plan. He went to the bakery that afternoon. It was a Thursday, quiet, mid-afternoon lull. Emma was doing end-of-day prep. Sophie was at school. He sat at the counter, and she brought him coffee without being asked and sat across from him. I called Derek this morning, he said. She waited. I turned down Arizona. Her expression shifted. Careful, hopeful, not quite letting herself get there yet. Ryan, it wasn't for you, he said quickly. Or it wasn't only for you. It was for Sophie, and it was for me, and it was for the man I want to be. I spent 12 years being Ryan Carter the brand, and Ryan Carter the captain, and I was good at it. I'm not saying I wasn't, but I was never. He stopped, found the word. I was never home. He stopped. I didn't know how much that mattered until I came back here, and there was a 6-year-old who already knew my career statistics and tried to correct my ice pack timing. Emma laughed, softly. I don't know what comes next for hockey, he said. Derek's looking at some options. Something local, something short-term. I might retire after next season, or I might not. I don't have the whole picture. He met her eyes. But I know what I'm not willing to lose sight of anymore. Emma was quiet for a moment, her hands around her coffee mug. You should know, she said carefully, that I didn't need you to do this. I wasn't going to. I know, he said. That's exactly why I did it. She looked at him. What are you saying, Ryan? I'm saying I want this, he said. All of it. You, Sophie, this town, this bakery, these cinnamon rolls that I am definitely developing a dependency on. This town, this bakery. I want the front porch and the lake and the farmer's market and watching Sophie march in the parade every summer for the rest of my life. He reached across the counter and covered her hand with his. I want to earn this. I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I'm just asking you to let me try. Emma looked at their hands on the counter. His large, weathered, careful. Hers still faintly dusted with flour from the morning. Okay, she said softly. He turned her hand over and held it. Okay, he said. Outside the window, a car passed. A kid on a bicycle. The clock tower showed 4 minutes slow, same as always. Millhaven, in the September light, looked like the most beautiful place in the world. Chapter 10. The family he never knew. He needed December arrived with snow. Family he never knew. The real kind. The kind that came in the night and by morning had turned Millhaven into a place from a Christmas card. All white rooftops and frosted maples and children in bright coats making tracks down the sidewalks before anyone had thought to shovel. Sophie's 7th birthday was on December 14th. The house on Birch Street, Ryan's mother's house, Ryan's house now, the yellow clapboard at the end of the block, had been decorated by Sophie herself, which meant the living room contained approximately 6 paper snowflake chains, a hand-lettered banner that read, Happy Birthday to Sophie, the I and E having gotten reversed in a moment of enthusiasm, and one hockey-themed table centerpiece made from a glue gun and silver tinsel. "It says Fasofe," Emma noted, looking at the banner. "I know," Sophie said. "I left it. It's character." "It really is," Ryan agreed. Emma looked at him. He shrugged, grinning. Ryan agreed. Ryan's mother, Margaret, had arrived 3 days earlier, and she and Sophie had achieved an immediate and mutual fascination that Emma found both heartwarming and slightly alarming. They had the same laugh and the same habit of tilting their heads when listening, and the same absolute certainty that their opinions were correct. "Shay's my grandmother," Sophie had informed Emma after day 1, with the tone of someone making an administrative announcement. "She is," Emma had said. "I'm going to call her Grandma Maggie." "Does she know that?" "I told her. She cried. It was fine." The party was small. Emma's best friend Claire, who ran the bookshop next door, and her husband, Lily, and her parents, old Mr. Finch from the bakery, who had been invited by Sophie personally, and who arrived with a jar of his homemade honey and a birthday card that he'd clearly spent time on. Ryan's physical therapist Barb, who had inexplicably become Sophie's favorite person after she'd shown up for a Tuesday appointment and ended up teaching Sophie the correct technique for wrist rotation. There was blueberry pie, obviously. The cake was chocolate with white frosting, decorated by Emma and Sophie together, and it said, "Happy 7th birthday." Sophie in blue icing, spelled correctly, with a small hockey stick drawing in the corner. "The stick is you," Sophie told Ryan, pointing at it. "I'm honored. It was supposed to be a rink, but it got small." "It's as perfect," he said. After the cake, after the presents, which included the Dragon Librarian journal that Ryan had commissioned from a local artist and that Sophie held with both hands and said nothing for approximately 30 seconds, which was the most meaningful silence Emma had ever witnessed. After everything, Ryan went to the kitchen where Emma was wrapping leftover pie in plastic wrap. "Hey," he said. "Hey," pie in plastic wrap. She didn't look up. "Emma, I need to ask you something," he said. From the living room came the sound of Sophie showing Grandma Maggie the wrist rotation technique, and Maggie laughing at something. Claire was telling a story. The house was warm and full of voices. "Okay," Emma said. He reached into his pocket and set something on the counter between them. A ring, simple and beautiful, a thin gold band with a small constellation of stones. Emma's hands stilled on the pie. "I'm not asking you to say yes right now," he said quickly. I'm asking you if this is something you could one day want. If I could be that for you. If we could be that." He paused. "I know we're still figuring it out. I know we've got history and baggage, and we haven't even been on a proper date yet, which I realize is a logistical failure on my part. Ryan, I'm not rushing you. I just need you to know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And this, you, Sophie, this house, this life, this is what I want to spend the rest of my life building, however long it takes, whatever it needs." He met her eyes. "I just wanted you to know that." Emma looked at the ring on the counter. She looked at the man across from her. This man she had loved at 23 and lost and mourned and lived without and built a life around the absence of. This man who had walked back into her bakery and sat down patiently and learned her daughter's wrist rotation opinions and stayed. Who had stayed? "Ask me properly," she said. He blinked. "What?" "If you're doing this, do it properly." She tilted her head toward the living room. "With Sophie in there." Something moved across his face, the beginning of a smile that became a real one, full and unguarded, the one she'd been watching come back into existence all summer. "Yeah?" he said. "Yeah." She slid the ring back across the counter to him. He picked it up. He walked into the living room, across the counter to him. Sophie saw him first. She always saw everything first. And she went very still in the way she had when she was paying careful attention. "Sophie," Ryan said. He crouched down to her level. "I love your mom, and I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life being your dad and her. Well," he glanced up at Emma, who had followed him in. "Her person, if she'll have me." Sophia's eyes moved from Ryan to Emma. "Are you proposing?" Sophie asked. "I'm trying to." "With a ring?" "Yes," Sophie considered. "Can I see it?" Ryan, with great seriousness, opened his hand and showed her. Sophie inspected the ring with her head tilted. "It has stars," she said. "It does," Ryan confirmed. "Mom likes stars." Sophie looked at Emma. "Mom, he got you the star ring." "I see that," Emma said. Her voice wasn't entirely steady. "Is this a yes or a no situation?" Sophie said to her mother. "Because I feel like I need information." So Emma laughed. The real laugh, the surprised one, the goose-honk one that she could never contain. And it moved through the warm, crowded room like light through a window. "Yes," she said. Sophie made the fist pump, Ryan's celebration, her version, with both arms, simultaneously. Grandma Maggie started crying immediately. Mr. Finch smiled from the armchair with the expression of a man who had stopped needing very much from the world and was getting it anyway. Claire said something to her husband that made him pull her close. Ryan stood up and crossed the room and slid the ring onto Emma's finger, and she looked at it for a moment and then looked up at him. "Home," she said quietly. "Home," he agreed. Sophie pushed between them and wrapped an arm around each of their middles, squeezing with the determined strength of someone establishing a fact. "Okay," she announced to the room. "Now we can do more birthday cake." Laughter. More laughter. Do more birthday cake. Outside, the snow was still coming down, soft and steady, laying itself over Millhaven in the way that December always did. Quietly, without asking, covering everything in a clean white layer that made the whole world look the way things look before any mistakes have been made, before any roads have been chosen. But inside the yellow clapboard house at the end of Birch Street, in the warmth and the noise and the gathered presence of people who had found their way to each other, Emma Collins looked at the ring on her finger and at the man beside her and at their daughter. Demanding a second slice of birthday cake with the absolute authority of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. And she thought, this is it. This is the thing. Not the version she had planned for, or even the version she had hoped for, but the real one. The one that had been coming together from the first moment, before she'd known, before any of them had known. The story that started with leaving and found its ending finally in the sweetest, most ordinary miracle there is. Coming home. 1 year later, on Sophia's 8th birthday, Ryan's debut with the new Chicago Falcons was a home game, 40 minutes from Millhaven, a deal Derek had eventually described as beautiful, Ryan, actually beautiful. I have a soul after all. And Sophia's entire second-grade class made signs. Ryan's sign, the one Sophie made herself the night before, with silver glitter paint that ended up on the kitchen ceiling, read, "Go Dad, number 11. He kept it. He had it framed. It hung in his locker for the rest of his career. He had it framed. And when the Falcons won the Stanley Cup 3 years later, in a game that went to overtime and ended on a goal that would be replayed on sports highlight reels for the next decade, the first thing Ryan Carter did, before the ice spilled over with teammates, before the cameras found him, before the roar of the crowd became something physical you could feel in your sternum, was look up into the stands. 2 people were standing up. A woman with flour-dusted hands. She'd come straight from the bakery. She always came straight from the bakery. And a 9-year-old girl in a jersey that said Carter on the back, doing the fist pump with both arms. Ryan Carter, team captain, Stanley Cup champion, pointed up at them and smiled. The end.